So this whole video thing is a learning curve, and doing this fully online class is as well. And in an effort to provide as much support as needed, I decided to do some videos to try to introduce the various sections in the modules. But like I said, it's a learning curve. So I just recorded a video and I forgot to turn my microphone on. I didn't get any word recording, and that doesn't do you any good. So I am doing this now for the third time and also trying to trim time off of it. In my opinion, about 15 minutes is the most I can hold your attention. And so that is my goal. The purpose of this video is as a brief course introduction and then an introduction to the next section of the reading that if you're following the schedule for reading, which is perfectly fine if you're moving ahead, it's perfectly fine if you're waiting for the weekend. The next section, we actually dive into Article 250 in Chapter 2. So, in the first thing, like I said, the first half, I wanted to introduce the material, this book here, and I'm pretty sure that's going to look backwards to you guys. I made a joke in the last video. In any event, the Mike Holt Understanding NEC Requirements for Bonding and Grounding book is the book that you were required to get. If I remember correctly, I noticed on the third year syllabus at the beginning of the year that it was missing, and asked them to put it on there because I knew you'd have new teachers and they wouldn't know what books were needed. And I think they got that on the 3A syllabus, but they didn't get it on the 3B syllabus. And it just so happens that you weren't going to use it until 3B anyway. But if you look at the syllabus and you look at the previous schedule that's for reference only, you'll notice down at the very bottom is reading assignments based on the Bonding and Grounding book. So get it ASAP. But for the first week and a half, I've provided the material I have, and I will try to supplement that with some of these short little lectures. So just to start out, the first reading assignment included 3 small sections of the Bonding and Grounding book. The first one was a brief little how to use the code book. Some of you that have had me as a teacher, hopefully as you read through that, you realize that a lot of that I've already told you. Then it focuses on Article 90, and then Article 100. For Article 90, which is just a explanation of the code book, and you're actually going to find something like that in every book about the code, every textbook about the code, is just a guideline that tells you why we have the electrical code, how to use the book, and some of the basic language nuances such as shall or shall not and stuff like that. And then in section 100, we have definitions. So what I provided was the slides for section 100. Unfortunately, that has every slide for every definition, whereas the book would focus just on bonding and grounding. So still a good resource, the slides plus the code book to be able to do the worksheets, but maybe not the best. And the reason that I am asking you to get the book is because you have to understand I'm teaching your class of about 40 people, and I'm also teaching another first year class. And so having the book to read just makes things a little bit easier to organize both of the classes into their individual curriculums. So the second purpose of this video is to give you a brief introduction on section or Article 250, which is our bonding and grounding article in the NEC, and the reading that you will be moving into for the second half of the week. And so I wanted to show you briefly just kind of how that is, how that section is structured, and then hopefully you'll kind of gain a better understanding of how to get around in it. So section 250 is found in chapter 2, which is why that's how it's listed. And it's broken into 10 parts. It looks like, yeah, 10 different parts. And each part has a specific thing. And so what you're looking at is a PDF version of the flowchart that's found within this section of the codebook. And so this right here is an easy way to be able to navigate. It's not so easy if you don't know where all the parts start and stop. But if you went through your codebook and highlighted all the places where they do, then that would be something you could do and would be allowed in a codebook that you used for your test. So if you go down the flow chart, you'll notice they're not in order. That's because some of those sections are about the same thing. So if you'll notice, part 3, 8, and 10 are all bunched together because they all contain system grounding information for those various voltage schemes, right? So whether it's direct current voltage or if it's over 1,000 volts. But part 2 is the one we usually focus on as electricians because we don't deal with direct current all that often while we're going through our apprenticeship, and we don't usually deal with anything over 1,000 volts. Part 3 is another major section that we need to focus on, and then parts 6 and 7. And then kind of because it's connected to all that, part 5 becomes really important. So I was going to do this in a series of videos. So, sit tight for more specific information, but I did want to clear up some of the more confusing points of the sections that I asked you to read through. So 1, 2, and 3. In 1, it's just a general, it's got the scope of the article, it's got definitions, it's got other general requirements, but the most important thing in there is that we have some code that gives us the concept of having a clean connection. So if we have enclosures that don't have inductive paint or conductive paint, we have to clean the paint off. We can't make dirt connections with dirt in the way. It has to be a clean surface, metal to metal, so that the integrity of our bonding and grounding is maintained as a very important safety feature. In part 2, the real confusion there is that we start talking about 2 different types of systems. And I'm not talking like DC and 100 volt or 1,000 volt over 1,000 volt. But what I'm talking about is the systems that come from the utility side, and then any other electrical system that's that can produce electricity or handle electricity that's separate from that system. And so the 2 things we use is utility and separately derived system. There may be other language for the utility side, like the main system or the separately derived system. But basically in section 2, we're talking about bonding jumpers, which is like when I go over this in class, I actually skim over it. And then when I'm going over grounding electrodes and equipment grounding conductors is when I put bonding jumpers back in there. But basically bonding jumpers serve as the bridge between those 2 systems, the grounding electrode system and the equipment grounding system um, are basically two separate things, and the conductors within them are sized differently. And then we have the bonding jumper in the middle that connects them. And so if we have a main bonding jumper, that would be for the whole electrical system utility on. If we have a system bonding jumper, that would be for any separately derived system, which are things like generators, um, uh, isolation transformers, or step down or step up transformers. We call that buck and boost. Um, Common for medical. A lot of the transformers that I mentioned are more common for hospitals and medical scenarios. Um, Other things that are considered separately derived would be a chassis mounted generator, which is completely separate from any utility system, and then your portable generators. And all of those fall under the purview of the electrical code, because you could burn your house down if you're not properly using them. So, like I said, watch for more videos. The next one is going to be about grounding electrodes. So part 3, which contains all the code on how we build a grounding electrode system. And then we'll do a video on parts 6 and 7, which talk about all the safety grounding and stuff that has been developed over the last 20 some odd years, and even some of the more recent stuff. So hang tight. And yeah, I think I had one other slide too, just to introduce the code. There's the second page. If you turn in, and this matrix, if you will, is showing all the places where there are bonding and grounding requirements that aren't covered in 250. And so, just to plug the book again, this is how it's laid out. You go over to 200, it's a large section, that's why it's split into 2. And then you go over bonding and grounding as found in chapter 3. So the requirements in chapter 3 on bonding and grounding might be certain sizing scenarios. And then chapter 4, which is 400 up to 499, whatever, is fixture and appliance or utilization, usage, special swimming pool provisions in 600 and 800, or other specific uses where grounding and bonding are required for safety. So thanks again for listening, and we will get you this other video here shortly.